Hi, welcome to another In Conversation series from the CTAD Clinic. I'm Dr. Mike Lloyd, and I have a special guest today who is Amanda, who you can see on screen and waving at you. So Amanda and I have known each other for quite a long time. We're trying to work it out. It's quite a few years since we sort of met up and started talking about all things dissociative. So Amanda's got dissociative identity disorder, DID, and we'll explain it all things about that in a short while. Quite late diagnosed, which is quite an interesting thing because that applies to quite a lot of people. Because sometimes people don't know they need diagnosis, and sometimes people find out later on, and all sorts of different contexts to that. So Amanda and I are here going to sort of talk about things related to dissociation, things related to life and learning. And I'm really pleased to have Amanda in here. It's a wonderful opportunity to find out a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes. So let's jump in to our conversation. Amanda, I think I'd really be, best placed if you just give us a bit of an overview about yourself and give the people watching a chance to know a little bit about yourself and some of the work you do and what got you into this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Mike. I think one of the great things about this series is one of the things that actually we're passionate about, we can talk about perhaps a bit later, is having conversations between clinicians, as a collective word, and people with lived experience, because I think it's only really been in perhaps more recent years that we've had opportunities to do that. And I think it's a really great thing that that there isn't this kind of big divide between therapists and people with lived experience. So that's
Absolutely.
good.
Yeah. And I think I certainly got that from the old first person plural days, working with,
Yeah,
Melanie and Catherine, and right from the off. I think
yeah,
we learn from these sort of things, don't we? The therapy is one thing and all that stuff, but just being able to talk to each other and figure each other out, always a good thing.
yeah, absolutely. I'm Amanda. I'm the one that's talking to you today, and I'm the one that generally goes about doing everyday life.
Okay.
And we were, as you mentioned, we were diagnosed in our late 40s. So it wasn't to our late 40s. That was in 2016. So those of you can do
Not
the
that long
maths, not that
ago.
long ago.
Yeah.
And so late diagnosed, and actually late onset of symptoms. I think that's important to kind of highlight, because up until that point, we had absolutely no idea that we were more than one.
Okay.
And so I think that that's pretty important, because
Mm.
from our point of view, we really are starting our healing journey quite late on in life, later than perhaps we would have liked,
Yes,
really.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So yeah, we were formally diagnosed in 2016, and there are collectively there at the moment there are 8 of us, including myself,
Okay. Yeah.
and we kind of settled on a collective name as a system name. So for anybody watching that isn't familiar, that's kind of like our internal family, our kind of bunch of selves. We
Yeah.
tend to call ourselves selves.
Okay.
And we've got a collective name, which is Eternity, but we only tend to use that kind of within the community,
Okay.
as like a system name, really.
That's quite personal to you all, then, really.
Yeah. And then it wasn't really long after our symptoms became apparent when we were working.
Yeah.
That was in 2016, and we got diagnosed later on that year. And then in 2018, we needed to stop work.
Right.
So we don't work, we're not employed at the moment. We do other work, which
You
we
do
can,
have a lot going on, yeah.
yeah, we have a lot going on, but we're not employed anymore, and gave up work
Right.
back in, yeah, well, we actually were dismissed on the grounds of ill health in the end, but
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
But our role was a very demanding, quite sort of public senior role in food and agriculture, and yeah, we can talk about it perhaps a bit later on, but work was a very big part of my life, for good reasons and for some not so good reasons.
Yeah, and I suppose it takes a big chunk of your time when you think about how many hours in any given day you're actually sort of being at work. And then, like you said, you only really got diagnosed a bit later on. So, what, 8, 9 years ago, maybe something along those sort of lines?
Yes.
Lots of changes have clearly taken place in your life, and you've had to recalibrate a huge amount.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so then in terms of how we spend our days,
So
the
flavor of that.
Yeah, so we are involved with others in having just just formally got registered charity status for a UK-based charity, which is the Dissociative Disorders Alliance.
The DDA?
The DDA for sure, yeah. And the alliance aspect of that is really important because we very definitely have aspirations to kind of be signposting and linking up and working with others, particularly given that, you know, the online access that we all have gives us lots of opportunities to join up globally.
I think it's a hugely important thing.
Yeah. And so for anyone at the moment, even though we're now formally registered, we've got a huge journey ahead of us with recruiting new trustees, onboarding more volunteers and allies, and then actually commencing things like fundraising, because we couldn't really start fundraising until we got registered status, because we needed registered status to get a bank account. So it kind of all, you know,
I remember
going on.
We've had some conversations, haven't we, just like setting up and just the sheer volume of paperwork that's involved. And I think from the perspective of being a system and being dissociative and having all of that to do, to get your head around the nature of charitable status for an organization, I take my hat off to you, because I think that it's phenomenal, the amount of work and the organization involved in that. So you've really been able to achieve that, given everything else that you've had to deal with in the last few years.
Yeah, and I think it's also a really good sign, as you know. I mean, the previous UK charity didn't close out of the fact that there wasn't a need for a charity. It was more it was that was no longer the best vehicle. But what's been really encouraging is the coming together, and again, that's been not just people with lived experience, but we very much want it to be right across the field, and also involving, hopefully, allies, friends, supporters, professionals in the field, so that those of us with lived experience also have others around us as well.
Well, absolutely. And we can't do our work in isolation. We have to have lots of resources and people around us. Why should it be any different? And maybe, I remember my sort of first introduction into dissociation was like partly sort of the training that First Person Plural were putting on with the Pottergate Centre. And maybe the DDA can be the sort of organization that starts with training and helps sort of clinicians new to the field and wanting to know more can learn how to understand this really interesting and kind of slightly odd field at times.
And I think some of the work that we've been doing collectively, so a huge shout out to everyone that's played a part, and also just to say as well, we hopefully will be here for a very long time, and so there'll be so many opportunities for people to help out. But one of the things we want to do is to sort of scope out where the gaps are, scope out what's already working really well, where can we signpost to, and also maybe look at things quite fresh, because let's look at how technology can play to our strengths. And I mean, even since I've been diagnosed, the amount of information and the amount of people that are now active both in the peer space and people like yourselves, with your YouTube channel, the way that that's grown. So so I think we really very much want to kind of focus on that alliance building, rather than sort of feeling like we need to be everything to everyone, because there's some great work already happening.
There is. And thinking about great work and people that you've needed to sort of help you along the way, has anyone, whether it's partly this sort of chapter of your life or a previous chapter of your life, has anyone sort of been particularly influential and helpful in getting you to kind of where you are, to have all of this, this determination, this commitment to things? Has anyone really helped out in a big way for you?
I think for us, I mean, it does indicate just how much has changed, because when I think back to when I first started looking online, I think I Googled, what is dissociation and, dissociative identity disorder. I had absolutely no clue what I was in for, I can really say. Yeah. But when I first kind of looked, there was nowhere near what's available now. And actually, hats off to people that previously, and I know I've heard them speak of it, people that were needing to go into libraries to find out information, and because as we know, the internet just did not exist.
Yep.
So in the early stages, I think when I first did that Googling, it was Carolyn Spring in her previous kind of iteration of pods, but Carolyn Spring in particular. And I really have a lot to thank Carolyn for, because her material was available online and made sense to me. And it also appealed to, I've got quite an analytical way of viewing things. So Carolyn's kind of in-depth scrutiny helped me. And then the previous charity, First Person Plural. So in the early stages, it was Carolyn and also some YouTube channels that were emerging then, which was Jess, Multiplicity and me, and a few other YouTube channels that that were around. And that's kind of really where and Facebook, there were Facebook sort of groups. So it's difficult to kind of think of individuals, but also someone where I look to quite a lot is Teresa Dutcher, the website dissos.com. And we just happen to like the way that Teresa blogs, and we find quite a lot of her content that we can identify with as well.
Yeah, it's very manageable content.
Yeah. And then now there are so many people on Instagram and social media in our community that we really would struggle without them, especially on days when we're struggling ourselves. So and we have to say this because we very much value your content.
Oh, thank you.
So and I think what's important for us with that is it gives us something that if we want to send information to professionals, say we were gathering information for funding requests, or also even people that we're introducing to what is DID, we really feel it helps having someone with your experience and in an active clinic talking very credibly about DID as well as people in our own community. So we're very grateful for that too.
Yeah, and I it's grown because I think it's been the comments that people put in and the interest in it, and just you can just see the demand. It's international demand, and you can see what problems many people might have just not being able to get hold of that information. I think the journey that you've traveled, even thinking about that was still in the 21st century, what people were sort of doing that in the 1980s, 1990s, and there just wasn't that available. So few things. So, and I think people, Carolyn is wonderful. I took a patient that I was working with DID, actually took to one of Carolyn's talks, and we sat in a room, and there's maybe a couple of hundred people in there, and I think the lady that I took along, she just sort of blown away just by how many people with dissociation there were, because she felt I'm the only one, so isolated, had no context And we were sitting there and she was looking down the room and she's going, there's a lot of people here like me. And it's like, yeah, but you won't
Yeah.
know which ones are which ones those are, which ones the the clinicians, the family, because we're all just people at the end of the day.
Mm.
And yeah, we have to look out for each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so so going back and thinking about your life and the journey that you've traveled, you've clearly had many sort of obstacles and many challenges that you've had to face professionally. You've clearly done an awful lot to get to a high level and the pressures and all of the different things. Has there been any, just for interest sake, really, has there been anything that where you've gone back, you've looked back in your life and thought it was that moment that kind of sent me off on this path, or that sliding doors, if you'd have turned left, your life would look like this. If you'd have turned right, it's now like this. Have you had any of those kind of like moments in your life and reflections on those?
Yeah, so when I was kind of when I watched one of your previous In Conversations, I was really kind of struck by that question because
Yeah.
we kind of, I think, view our life very definitely as kind of pre and post diagnosis, because
Mm.
life is just unquestionably so different. Other than the fact that we are many now.
Mm.
So I think there's kind of two really that.
Okay.
When we were younger, one thing that was a path that we chose for lots of reasons, which was a really defining moment, was when we, in our early 20s, took on bringing up my younger sister, who's 13
Right.
years younger than me.
Okay, gosh.
So we were as I say, in our early 20s.
Yeah.
And the moment that we made the decision to have my little sister, I still call her my little sister, even though she's very
It's a
grown up
proper
now,
grown up and
proper
everything.
grown up with her own children.
Yeah.
And yeah, there is absolutely no doubt that changed the trajectory of
Oh.
my life from that moment onwards, very definitely.
I'm guessing you wouldn't have. Oh, I'm guessing you wouldn't time travel back and change that decision then from the look, from the
No,
smile on your face. I guess not.
yeah, I mean, some of it was I felt a huge sense of responsibility. So would I have changed the fact that both of us, my sister and I, were in a situation where I didn't need to take that responsibility,
Yeah.
then that I would change. But those were circumstances that life just happened to throw at us. And so given the same circumstances again, I would still make the same decision.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I was only in my early 20s myself.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that's kind of like a very defining moment in my life. And then more latterly, it was the day I decided, after maybe 18 months
Mm.
of deliberation, to stop work and to actually call in. In fact, the anniversary of doing that is coming up soon.
Wow.
To actually, for the first, call in sick.
Yeah.
So we had a work. Now I didn't appreciate it back then, but we had a work addiction.
Oh, wow.
Um,
So you were
and
just you were full on.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very much so. So, and with that also came disclosure. So I also took the decision to disclose that we had dissociative identity disorder, and wanted my colleagues, because at that time I went off sick, I wasn't immediately dismissed,
Sure.
but took the
Yeah.
decision that I wanted my colleagues and anybody that asked that question to know that.
Wow.
So making the decision to
That's huge.
disclose it was DID was one of those moments. Yeah.
And any regrets about that at this stage?
I had a lot of people saying to me that we would regret it,
Yeah.
and there are many times when I wonder whether things that have happened to me more latterly, losing my marriage and my stepchildren and losing my job and all sorts of other things that have happened since 2016,
Yeah.
or 2018 when we finally had to stop work. I often wonder, would those have been different had I not have been so determined really to be open?
Okay.
But would I have done that differently? No, because we really feel, we feel really strongly about, we hope one day being able to be fully authentic.
Fair enough.
And so being open and honest about what is really a serious mental health condition,
Yeah.
we felt was, we've always been very open and honest. And so we needed to continue with those values, really.
That's great. And that sounds like that very in keeping with just the nature of who you were. So to not do that wouldn't
Yeah.
doesn't sound like it would sit very
It just
comfortably.
wasn't an option, really. No, no. And even I can remember sitting around the table with, just before I was about to go off sick, I told colleagues that I was struggling because I was managing a team and leading a board and yeah, in a kind of senior role. So I actually sat down with my work colleagues, and at the time I kind of gently teased in complex PTSD and kind of saw how that went down.
Okay.
Yeah, and then yeah, went on to talk about DID, which just kind of blew most people away, really. And
So
yeah,
what was their reaction then? Were they curious, or did you feel like you were being pushed away, or I mean, how did it go?
I think the thing that people were struggled with most is that when we talk about workplace adjustments,
Yeah.
for I think really, if the workplace was better able to understand the impact of what I'd call a toxic work environment, sort of difficult behaviors in a workplace or things that are really stressful beyond where they need to be. So if people were able to think of workplace adjustments as behavioral orientated
Mm.
and not just, oh, well, you need a different laptop or you need a different chair, or, making those physical adjustments, which are equally as important, obviously. But
Yep.
if we could get to a point where there's a better understanding that the bullying behavior from a work colleague, or the way in which we're treated, or the way in which people have almost expectations about workload,
Yeah.
then it may well be that, some people are able to be kept in the workplace. But for us,
Mm.
the most difficult thing was the fact that when we were asking for workplace adjustments, and most of those were behavioral changes that we needed to see,
Yeah. No chance.
there just was not the resource or the willingness or even the kind of,
Yeah.
why would we change that? So
But it's incredible though, because you sort of think the easiest thing to do, like if you went in and said, would it be okay if when we come into work next week, there's no bullying? That would be nice.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you can almost imagine employers going, well, there is no bullying. It's like, have you been paying any attention whatsoever to what's been going on? There's bullying in so many organizations, right from schools through to, all, top tier type stuff.
yeah,
It's just, yeah, the impact that has the way that people are treated is just,
yeah.
we know there are better ways. It seems just bizarre that those better ways are just not being put in. And
Yeah, and of course, because my dissociative ability was so strong,
yeah,
that up until that point, I was one of those people that everyone used to say, how do you manage all this stress? How do you
you
work
just
so
like,
many hours? And I was just, I mean, in fact, some people used to call me the Ice Maiden because
wow,
they could just throw anything at me, and I would be like, but
take it.
so nobody was really, well, in fact, I say nobody. There was one boss in particular who was kind of asking questions about, well, really, Amanda, you're going to lead to burnout, which is it actually what ended up happening. I had exhaustion and burnout, sadly. But I think it's almost because I was able to take, before my symptoms, kind of bubbled through, which
Yeah,
was due to burnout, really.
right.
Then there was also kind of like, it becomes assumptive, it becomes an assumption that you continue to work at that level. So it's almost like a passive thing, a passive pressure that people just continue to load onto busy people.
Yeah,
Um,
it is the way.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's
So yeah,
so you mentioned about your sort of the dissociative nature that actually that could mean that because you sort of appeared like you were really good at handling everything, more stuff just gets thrown at you and you just take
yeah,
more and it just ever increasing. would you say that your dissociation was an obstacle for you, or how do you see it now? Yeah,
I mean,
I do.
looking back, especially in one of the things perhaps as a community we can bring more to the fore is the physical impact and the impact that, because inevitably we're talking about a mental health condition, so we do tend to focus on, the symptoms that we struggle with in our minds.
Yeah, totally.
But now looking back, the physical impact on my body that I had absolutely no idea. It was just, the typical neck down thing, that everything was happening up here in terms of my cognition and, thinking and working and everything. But what that meant was I wasn't picking up hunger signals. I wasn't picking up thirst signals. I wasn't at all in my body.
Yes. Not aware.
I had muscle atrophy. I'd never exercised. I didn't eat properly. I didn't sleep properly. I had my breathing was dysfunctional. I was just looking back. So yeah, my dissociative ability very definitely as is always, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, you can get some places with it, but at what cost, I suppose?
It's a massive cost. And the other thing that makes me wonder, and maybe at some point in the future we will have research into this, is I often think, why is it that my symptoms didn't emerge until my late 40s, and with others, their symptoms emerge, as early as they can remember, being having the sense of other selves, or as teenagers or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's a real mystery to me. The only thing I can think of is that maybe if whatever your ism is, whether it's workaholic or in my case, or other means of dissociative distracting, if that is so strong and the compulsion to do that is so strong, that maybe that plays a part. It could also be perhaps maybe forced responsibilities. I don't know. Responsibilities that you. But anyway, it's a mystery. It's a mystery.
And I think, I'm sure many people watching this will have their own version of those sort of things. But it'd be interesting to know how you manage. So now, when things get difficult, so whether there's either physical side of things or the dissociation or just the disagreements that can take place internally when you're trying, there's a system, that doesn't mean everyone's in the same line when it comes to everything. So how do you get by when things are difficult? What is your go-to to try and make things easier for you, or to give yourself some space or some calm? What's your tactic, I suppose?
So this is one of those, it's a good thing and it's a not so good thing.
Okay, right.
So we need structure. We absolutely need structure, but also I think one of the reasons why we need structure is because I'm a bit phobic about losing control and kind of loosening the reins.
Okay.
So we manage by.
Do you mean with that, man? Did you mean sort of internally or in the outside world? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, both. In the even in our own home, I struggle to. I'm not co-conscious.
Okay.
So I struggle to allow downtime. So in one way, our managing is structuring the day, having a really clear plan, and exercising, eating, just surviving, really, just kind of making sure that we've got social connection and we're doing this and that and the other. So therefore, then we are no longer able to manage when something goes wrong with that structure, whether it's because we get ill, we can't run. So, for example, we run to help manage our symptoms. So if anything threatens that structure and those coping strategies, then we struggle.
Yeah.
But part of our struggle is we don't allow ourselves the downtime to feel and allow other selves to, be around in our daily life.
Yeah.
And so then that means that there's pressure on therapy time.
Okay.
But some of that is also because of the lack of awareness of DID in the outside world.
Do you mean
So,
like from other people towards you?
yeah, I
Yeah.
really strongly feel that if we felt that DID was kind of more, oh, look, that person over there looks like they, like they might be managing this, or, oh, look, that person over
Yeah.
there has more than one self, then we wouldn't be as fearful. Then we would feel more accepted by the world.
Yeah.
And then there wouldn't be quite so much pressure on my other selves only being around when there's a safe person for them to be with. And at the moment, we've only got a couple of safe people, and we haven't got really anyone that lives nearby. We've got no sort of physical support structure nearby. We've got people we can talk to on the phone, but
Yeah. So
no
that
one that
means
lives with us.
presumably then quite your way of dealing with things is more reliant on you, what you can achieve at home, how you can make your environment as good as possible sounds key.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so to some, it might seem that that's, I guess, another struggle is that we appear normal and for,
Yeah, you
whatever,
do.
whatever
I
that
mean, you
is.
do.
But we kind of, we don't send very many signals of distress.
No.
And so when we try to explain just how much distress we're in, then most people just can't conceptualize it because they just see me fronting. And that has lost us some good friends too, because they fake claimed us or said that we must be making it up.
Yeah, because it's you don't have tentacles growing out of your head, so therefore, what's wrong with you? I mean, yeah, and I think I think lots of people are going to empathize with that and
Yeah.
recognize.
So really, we managed, it won't surprise you to know, we managed through distraction and structure. I'd like to be in a position where we can still manage by allowing other selves to have more of our daily life. And and in those situations, we really look to other people in the community who are able to do that better than we can. So people that show signs of being able to play or being able to relax and embrace their other selves, because it is a barrier for us at the moment. The lack of co-consciousness as well is a barrier.
It's going to make it much harder, and the things that you're describing, they should be there, right? I mean, they're no ordinary, normal sort of things, to be able to have that level of control and understanding, but that's denied to so many people because of dissociation, and sometimes the simplest things just aren't there. You can sometimes do really complex stuff, but like really, some just day-to-day sort of things really can derail people quite a bit.
Yeah.
So when you're at home, this might be a question to sort of yourself and kind of all really about what do you for enjoyment for say TV or reading or movies or something, do you have like a go-to thing, a sort of a specific book or author or TV show, whatever it might be, that just allows you to be present and in one place for a bit of a distraction?
Yeah, we also thought a little bit about this one because this is our work in progress.
Yeah.
So partly for reasons for triggers, we're not able to read books yet.
Okay.
And we're not able to physically open a book. We struggle to watch movies for trigger reasons.
Sure.
And so where we'd like to get to is that we're able to perhaps tap into more creative play. Music is a really big part of some of my other selves.
What kind of genres? What sort of stuff?
He's into, it's a he, and he would be everything from the 1970s when we used to sit in our bedroom pressing play and record on our, on an old cassette recorder.
Yeah, I used to do this.
Or playing vinyls.
Yeah.
So things from the 1970s and 80s through to he can get himself completely lost, apparently, because I'm relaying what I'm told.
Yep.
He can get himself completely lost in a piece of classical music and feels his body move as if they're an orchestra.
Yeah. Wow.
So I think music, music is a very important thing for one of us in particular.
Good. Okay.
But yeah, the whole thing about being able to have downtime and allowing ourselves to just be is probably one of our kind of big goals.
That's a goal. I think it's an excellent goal to have.
Yeah, it's a
I,
big struggle.
say from the clinical perspective, obviously that's something that I take for granted, as a person, because that's simple, because I'm not dissociative, so I can have all of that stuff at my fingertips. It's quite easy. But I know from a clinical point of view, these things are achievable. So I'd say don't ever give up on the hope on that.
Yeah, I think we carry quite a lot of shame when we're not being productive. So we've got a lot of kind of inner critic going on. And so actually even to just sit down is kind of like a big obstacle. And I think as well, because we are actually quite lonely, I would say.
Okay.
And so we crave like connection.
Yes.
But then some of us want to be isolated. So that will be a familiar challenge for many people with DID, is that I, Amanda, like I've always connected with people who have big networks, and yet I haven't really now, I've got my community, the DID community, but in terms of I haven't really got someone we can just be us with.
Sure.
And I think were that to be the case, then we might be able to let go a little bit more, so that we don't feel quite so sort of isolated in learning how to let go.
Yeah. And I agree, because sometimes what's needed is permission. And obviously you're aware of what I've been going through, and I'm surgeons say rest, and I'm like, yeah, I will, and then I don't. And my wife's like, you should, I want you to, you need to, it's okay to, let the responsibility of the house and the upkeep given to someone else. Sometimes you just need that person that you are trusting to give you permission to do that. Say it's
I think
for you to stop, right? You can let go.
Yeah, and I think as well. Sorry, I think that because we've been through such a significant life changes, with divorce and having to leave our home and losing children and stepchildren and grandchildren, and so and our career, a lot of loss. Then it's almost like I've had to stay in adult mode to deal with divorces and paperwork and all the inevitable stuff that comes with moving house. And so actually it's almost like it very definitely has hampered our progress in terms of healing, because we've had probably 6 years worth of managing all of that. So it's, in a way, I suppose, if I'm giving myself a break, it's no wonder that I've just had to keep the reins tight and just keep on surviving. And at some point it'll be okay, start over.
And I think, maybe all the work you're doing with the Dissociative Disorders Alliance, with the DDA, with the community, bringing people in, what you're engaging in are connections. I mean, this is, there's something about, creating this for everybody so that it can build awareness, build understanding. Absolutely, all of that is needed. But at the same time, you're making friends along the way, you're meeting people, you're engaging. And I'm sure a lot of the conversations that you're having around the DDA or any other projects or any things you're going on, sometimes those are just fun conversations to have.
I mean,
you're enjoying it as you go along.
Yeah, the good thing is that, we can have a giggle sometimes. We do try and see the humorous side of, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but a piece of chocolate, and we end up with a piece of chocolate in one hand, a piece of cheese in the other, and and just the way in which we eat, for example, is quite bizarre to us, but for other people with DID, we just like totally get it and we'll have a giggle about it. So yeah, at least we can have some of those, as well as some quite heartfelt, deep discussions. But yeah, some of the kind of sense of belonging very definitely is when we're talking to people in our own community, because we can just like, so that's a big thing. It's a massive thing.
It is. And it's a huge thing for you to be working on, I suppose. The challenge of trying to develop this and build this thing, and there's certain levels you have to get to within the charitable status. And do you see a time ahead when it'll be done? And do you have the ability to sort of like imagine yourself in the future and see yourself just getting all of this done and meeting people and maybe doing conferences and training events and just engaging? Do you have a sense that that's there for you?
Yeah, I think if I looked at that as a sort of whilst of course all of us are volunteers, one of the challenges for me is because work was my addiction.
Yeah.
Then one of the things I have to really, really work on is being boundaried with my charitable work.
Yeah.
So that in itself is a big learning curve. But setting that to one side, one of the things that we've been really kind of keen to do is buddying up. So to make sure that when we collectively as a charity and everyone in the community, because we definitely aren't the DDA over here and the community, we are all the DDA almost in a way, because we're all the community. Is to make sure that there's at least 2, if not 3 of us working on the same thing at the same time.
Oh, lovely.
So that we can kind of deal with ebbs and flows of everyday life.
Yep.
So if we kind of think of that over there, we can see, strategically where we'd like to be, tactically where we'd like to be, because I'm quite good, I think, at sort of strategic thinking and looking into the future. When it comes to us, we have to look to others to hold hope for us. Because we really do take our own kind of situation literally day by day, sometimes minute by minute. Yeah. So it's more difficult for us. I mean, obviously the DDA is part of us and part of what we do. But if I look at my own, though, in terms of us, we've almost needed to pull back to just get through today, because if we try and project too far forward, we build too many expectations on ourselves, and because we're quite, as I said before, we carry a lot of shame if we don't feel we're meeting milestones.
Yeah, so you don't want to be putting too many milestones in front of you, because you're just going to hit the same.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that is difficult to describe in all of our healing journeys, is that, when I think I was diagnosed in 2016 and here I am now, however many years later, but actually we haven't really had much opportunity to turn to. We've been doing stabilization and learning to ground. And one of my big things is about learning about the autonomic nervous system, which is one of my big kind of pet focuses, if you like, along with running shoes, by the way.
Well, you are a runner, so you've got to have good shoes.
Yeah, running shoes. Is that I've lost my train of thought now.
Well, you were talking about really getting into the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah. But in terms of like us managing, then if we, I know what I was going to say. Sorry, DID moment there. It's that if I think about the sort of 8 years or however long it's been, we spent most of that just trying to deal with our current life.
Yeah.
And obviously then that's been it's actually given us fresh trauma and things that have been re-triggering. And so almost in a way we've hardly touched some of the early stuff. So yeah, that's why in a way we have to pace ourselves a bit.
I think so, because that's a whole journey. For things. So
yeah.
So thinking about everything, your life, all the different paths that you've walked on, and there's been many, and there's been kind of like zigzaggy moments and all sorts of stuff going on for you, clearly. What do you think is the most important lesson that you've learned from your life to this point?
I'd say that up until recently, I was probably focusing, if I think about now with DID, I think I was focusing quite a lot on understanding us, which has been very, very, very important.
Yeah.
But had I have not done the work to look after myself physically, and when I say that, I mean absolutely starting from scratch.
Yeah, no,
How to eat, how to looking after my sleep. I've needed to navigate as well. I'm navigating the menopause.
yeah.
So the biggest thing I think I've learned is the importance of the basics, but also just how challenging it is for people with DID to get back in touch with our bodies. Yeah.
Huge.
Learning how to breathe and having to just do that. It's taken me 6 years, I'd say, to learn how to breathe properly because I was all upper chest breathing.
Yeah.
So a lot of my learning, I think, has been about learning about our nervous system, learning about good nutrition, and almost some of that has been forced. But yeah, so it's almost all of the stuff outside of the therapy room as well as, and so I think the other learning for me is one of the things I'd love us all to carry forward is how can we give hope to people who have not yet got access to therapy, whilst we're all collectively trying to strive forward to get to a point where people have the right to therapy. What collectively can we all do to help one another still have some quality of life, and have some kind of collective scheme or roadmap or whatever, and skills and tools so that we can help others have hope. And then my other big learning is about it's almost like a learning about what I'd like things to have done differently. What could we do to help other people learn how to spot signs of dissociation in very young children?
Because that would help enormously.
My learnings have almost been, what questions have I got unanswered as well?
Well, I think you'll be very important in the finding of those answers as well, because those are good questions. And to, as a life point, firstly, how to look after yourself, because without that, you can't really do a whole lot else. You get stuck. But then the learning is how to ask these questions and how to make change, and so that, and you've learned kind of the hard way why that will be so significant for you. So thank you very much, Amanda.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Thank you for giving us all your time this afternoon and sharing so much. And I really hope that this is going to be one of those really useful instruments that people can use to see themselves reflected in what you're saying, and feel that they have a right to be who they are, and they're going to struggle and they're going to find things difficult, but there is a way to get through. And I often say, the resources, the people around us, sometimes they are the most important things that we can have for ourselves or our own journey. So
we take a lot of heart when we get feedback. We do get messages saying, we saw your X, Y, and Z interview or whatever. And actually, that's the one thing that really touches our heart, when we know that something that we've said has helped someone else. That's kind of the biggest motivator, really.
Well, that's the essence of making a difference, and I think that's why I really enjoyed the YouTube channel and doing this stuff, because I put my witterings out there into the world, as it were, and then I read the comments, and it's like people saying that resonated and thank you, and it's that makes you realize that I'm just talking to a camera, but people are listening and people are taking something from that. So between us, I think we're doing some good stuff. We're doing some really interesting things. It's not easy, and everything that you're doing there are many challenges, and you've got plenty that you're achieving already, and I'm sure there'll be plenty to achieve in the future. without the pressure of all the milestones and having to get everything done in this right.
Yeah,
So
likewise.
yeah, so go from strength to strength, Amanda, and we'll obviously we're in touch, so we'll keep
Thank you, Mike. Yeah.
as we go along. So I'm going to jump onto the camera to say ta-ra to everyone, but on behalf of everybody here on the channel, I'd just like to thank you very much, Amanda, for being you and sort of helping us understand what it's like to be
thank you for the
dissociative.
opportunity.
You're absolutely welcome. So thank you to everybody watching. I'm sure that Amanda would be kind of like looking at the comments and would be really interesting to see what people think and questions that people might ask. It's doing this work really that gives us that connection to you all to understand what it is that you're going through, and that helps us understand what it is that might be needed to try and help, and both with ourselves at the CTAD Clinic and with the Dissociative Disorders Alliance. And we'll have links to the various enterprises that they're putting together at the end of the video in the text. So please do sort of have a look at those and find out what that's going on, and contribute in any way that if you feel that you can do, or just give us ideas and give us pointers about what we can be doing in this kind of wonderful and strange world of dissociation. So thanks ever so much for watching. Look forward to reading the comments as always, and we'll keep producing these videos. And obviously in between now and the next time we do the next video, please do take great care.